All right, good evening. We're going to talk a little bit about training here, as well as how that training matches our deployments. So I try to keep these videos on the shorter side. I know people have busy schedules, just like me. I go through YouTube. I look at videos and all kinds of stuff I really like to watch, but sometimes I just don't have time for it. So I'm going to try not to make these any longer than what they have to be. But this is really important. This is something that we need to talk about. It's an issue that I see time and time again. I've seen it over the years, and I'm sure we'll continue to see it. Now, this is not a video about, hey, be like Mike, be like me. I'm perfect, because I'm not perfect, okay? I struggle with things with dog training. But we really need to talk about this. So when we're talking about addressing issues with your training and how much your training matches your search environment or your deployments, if you will, we need to make sure that we have ways, first of all, of keeping track of what those deployments look like. Because how are you going to know exactly how to set up your training and make sure you're covering all the bases in the training to match your deployments if you're not keeping track of those statistics and stuff? So, for example, if I were to ask you how often, or what's your average search duration time, your average nose time for your dog? Are you doing a minute-long search? Are you doing 30-minute-long searches, 5 minutes, whatever? How often are you deploying different types of weather? Or how often are you working indoors versus outdoors? And what's the outdoor environment look like? How often are you deploying under a full moon on a Tuesday during the rain? No, just joking. You don't have to get that specific, but you need to have a way of looking those things up. So what I'm going to do, just as kind of an example, let me look this up here. So if you're curious, this is going back through current dog, my previous dog, and the dog before that, where I did a little bit of gun detection with. She was actually a cadaver dog, but I did a little bit of gun detection. We didn't really know what we were doing back then, but the deployment, the type of work I do has not changed since going back to 3 dogs ago. And so I keep track of all of that, so I have as much data, as much reference points as I can, just to be able to make sure I have a great basis for what my training should look like. And this does not include any of the security work that I do. That's a different animal altogether. This is the strictly with the regular gun deployments that I did in law enforcement, and then I now do as a civilian with a not-for-profit. So just to say this, the average temperature, 60.71 degrees. So that's going back a number of years. And that's really quite meaningless because in the Midwest here, we have hot summers and cold winters. But I have that, it's a legitimate thing. 60.71 degrees is the average temperature on a deployment. Again, I don't have to train for that because the temperature is going to vary. Just an example. But if I'm looking at like the types of areas, let me click on here. All options. Okay. So deploying the dog in an open field, searching an open field for a gun, 17%. A residential yard, 17% as well. Wooded area with low density, in other words, not a lot of underbrush or anything, 14%. A wooded area with high density, thick weeds, about 11%. A residential street, searching along a residential street for a gun or for shell casings or whatnot, 9% of the time. Inside buildings, about 7% of the time. I don't do a ton of indoor searches for that. The exterior of the building, 8%. I got parking lots, roadways, everything down to interstate highways, which 0.88% of the time, searching along an interstate highway. Anyway, I say this just to be an example of some of the data that I collect. When we're talking about, okay, what would be the source that we're looking for? Well, pistols and handguns make up about 55% of the searches. That's when I know what we're searching for exactly. Sometimes I don't know. Fire shell casings, 19% of the searches. And it just goes on from there. Whether it's live ammunition, looking for rifles, specifically looking for a rifle in whatever search environment, 7.04%. So it's good to have these records. It's good to have ways of figuring out, what do you need to be doing for training. And yes, you do have to train for all the environments, right? Just because I don't typically search along an interstate highway, like I said, it was what, like 0.088%. Well, guess what? I still have to make sure my dog can do that for that one time we do have to do it. So you have to search the whole game. You have to train for the whole gamut. But when you're looking at what you're spending most of your time for, and whenever you're going out there trying to sell the service that you and your dog are offering, you need to make sure that you're truly training for all these things and that your training matches. So as an example, I spent a lot of time as a cadaver dog handler, working human remains, as well as being a trainer for human remains detection dogs and certifying dogs all over the country. And one thing I've seen repeated in these types of situations is the handler that, let's just say that on a normal training day, first of all, they typically use only their own source. And again, this is an example of the bad handler. This is not to say that this is the average, because most people are much better than this, okay? But I've seen this a number of times where training looks like you drive to a park, you get out, you place your training aids around a parking lot, the dog finds everything within a minute or two, and good dog, good job. You go home, and guess what? You get called out on a 10-acre heavy, thick timber search that you're working now. And does your training look like your deployments? Absolutely not. If that's you, if that's what you're doing, you're a fraud. I mean, that is fraudulent. It's a lack of integrity. And over the past 25 years, I've seen that in a number of cases, and not just cadaver, narcotics, explosives, you name it. That there are a lot of people that they don't take the time to make sure that they are training their dog for that type of environment. And the one thing you can ask yourself, okay, if I'm going to do this type of search, can I point to anything in my training records to show where I consistently train for this, or where I train enough for it? Now, I will add this. You will get the oddball searches here and there. And there are certain things where there might be extenuating circumstances. You might be the only game in town. It might be something that's impossible to really train for. We do a lot of, I'm the search manager for a lot of searches where we do cold case investigations. There's no way you can truly replicate a 20-year-old buried cold case situation. There are things that we do, but you can't totally replicate that. So there are going to be the situations where maybe you don't have something you can point to in your records to show, but you need to be making every effort, and that those need to be the abnormal situation, not the normal. Something else that's kind of interesting, and we do this a lot with our cadaver searches, because a lot of times we have advanced warning for that. That's kind of one of the nice things about it. We might get a search and know about it, a month in advance, and have time to train for it. And it's kind of like the military, where they do operational workups, where they have a mission, for example, that they know they're going to do, and they know where they're going to do it at. They know the type of enemy they're going to face and what the enemy defenses are. So they will actually train for that specific environment. And we do that sometimes. So if we know that we have a search that's going to involve a lot of culverts and storm drains, and somebody, potential human remains down in a sewer or whatnot, we will set that up and we'll work it. We had a situation where we worked a big giant mulch pile. Well, guess what we did? We had advanced notice, and we were setting up examples. It's impossible to replicate that exactly, but you sometimes you need to take advantage of learning what you have upcoming, your upcoming mission, so to speak, and then finding ways to train in advance for it if you have that luxury. A lot of times you don't have that luxury. But and one thing I will say here before I wrap up, none of this says that none of this would say that you shouldn't also do your fundamentals and your your rapid motivational searches and simple stuff. You need to do all types of training, but like I said, you need to make sure that what you're doing, what you're selling yourself as being able to do with your dog, that you can actually point to something in your training records and show that you do that, that you train for that. So, and that can be, we don't just want to, for example, work on a long duration problem every single day and the dog finds something an hour into the search. We want to make sure the dog also finds things right away. Keep the dog guessing. Make sure that our training is complete. And those motivational things, the runaways for the experienced trailing dog, yeah, go out and have fun, motivate the dog, do fun stuff, go to your fundamentals, just like being an athlete or a musician or something. You're going to work on individual, on specific tasks to put the building blocks together. But like I said, you do need to be training you need to be doing operational training for your operational dog. So appreciate you tuning in, and like and subscribe if you like this, and have a good night. Talk to you later.